You've been told that transformation needs to be announced, that real change requires witnesses, validation, documentation on social media. But here's what shifts everything. The deepest alterations in your reality happen when absolutely no one is looking. They unfold in complete silence, invisible to every eye except your own. Like stumbling upon a secret passage in a room you thought you knew completely. You'd walked past that wall 1,000 times, certain of its solidity. Then your fingers find an edge, a mechanism releases, and suddenly you're stepping into a completely different dimension of possibility. This is what we're exploring today. The invisible quantum shift. The transformation that rewrites everything while the world sleeps, unaware that you're becoming someone entirely new. Here's the conditioning we've all absorbed. Change must be visible, measurable, broadcast to count as real. Our culture celebrates the grand announcement, the complete life overhaul shared online, the public commitment to transformation. But the truth hidden beneath this noise, the most permanent shifts never announce themselves. They happen in the quiet architecture of your neural pathways. Neuroscience reveals that your brain reconstructs itself through thousands of microscopic neural events, tiny electrical conversations between cells that gradually build entirely new circuits of thought and behavior. These foundational sparks of becoming occur completely beneath the surface, invisible to observers, yet they form the bedrock of who you're evolving into. And here's the paradox that traps so many seekers. The compulsion to broadcast transformation is itself evidence of the old identity trying to maintain control. Because genuine change doesn't need an audience, it needs coherence. Let's look at how quantum mechanics illuminates this principle. Before any measurement occurs, particles exist in what physicists call superposition. Every potential reality suspended simultaneously in the quantum foam, waiting. The collapse from potential into actuality doesn't thunder into existence. It happens in an instant so subtle, so quiet, that only the conscious observer recognizes the shift. Reality itself transforms without ceremony. This is precisely how your most profound personal evolution operates. You attune to a new frequency in the privacy of your consciousness, and the quantum field begins reorganizing around that signal without requiring anyone else's awareness or approval. Most people fail here because they're conditioned to expect dramatic evidence. But existence is architected to change in whispers, not shouts. Reflect on your own experience for a moment. Have you felt the exhausting pressure of trying to demonstrate that you're evolving? Sharing every insight online, explaining your new direction to everyone you know, desperately seeking confirmation that your transformation is legitimate. That hunger for external validation is actually a signal that the shift hasn't stabilized in your system yet. Authentic transformation doesn't perform for approval. It registers as a profound internal click, a knowing that needs no explanation. A shift in your fundamental state that moves beneath your awareness until one day people begin saying, "Something's different about you. I can't quite name it, but you've changed." That moment is when they're finally perceiving what's been unfolding invisibly within you for weeks or months. That's the secret passage revealing itself. Now here's the paradox most people never confront. The more invisible your transformation remains, the more irreversible it becomes. When you announce it publicly, you risk fragmenting your energy outward, scattering the very coherence necessary to stabilize the new version of yourself. When you hold it in silence, you concentrate and amplify it. This isn't about keeping secrets for their own sake. It's about achieving such deep internal alignment that the shift encodes itself into your nervous system completely before external forces can introduce doubt or resistance. Think of germination. The seed disappears into darkness underground. No witness, no celebration of its progress. Yet that invisible period is precisely where root systems develop and structural integrity forms. By the time the shoot breaks through soil, it's already established, inevitable, no longer vulnerable to being uprooted. But most seekers stumble into a specific trap here. They mistake external noise for internal progress. They pursue visible markers instead of cultivating the invisible state of being. Your brain craves closure, so it constantly searches for tangible evidence that transformation is occurring. Yet the genuine missing piece isn't found in external milestones. It lives in your internal frequency. Let this land for a moment. Your life will become exponentially more stable, magnetic, and expansive the moment you shift internally without requiring anyone else to validate that shift. That's the puzzle your subconscious has been trying to solve all along. Not how to prove change to others, but how to become change so completely that proof becomes irrelevant. Every wisdom tradition across human history points toward this same truth. Silence carries the deepest codes of transformation. Neville Goddard taught that the real creative power lives in what he called the inner chamber, the private space of imagination, where you assume the feeling of your wish already fulfilled. Joe Dispenza's research demonstrates that when your heart and brain enter coherence, your body becomes an electromagnetic signal broadcasting into the quantum field. And this broadcast requires zero external witnesses to reshape your reality. The silent frequency is already transmitting. Others don't need to perceive it for the field to reorganize around your new state. So let me ask you the question that must be asked. If transformation happens in such profound silence, if the shift occurs hidden from view, why do most people never walk through that secret passage? The answer isn't what you expect. It has nothing to do with discipline or willpower. It has everything to do with addiction. We're addicted to recognition, addicted to being witnessed, addicted to external confirmation that something is happening. This addiction keeps us standing directly in front of the door, unable to see that our hand is already touching the mechanism that opens it. We wait for applause to give us permission to step forward, but the hidden passage only reveals itself to those who move in silence. Here's the truth that transforms everything. Your reality can shift completely while no one notices, because the noticing was never the point. The point is becoming. And becoming always initiates in silence before manifesting as visible evidence. The less you attempt to prove your evolution to others, the more rapidly and completely the quantum field mirrors that evolution back to you. This is the principle the world doesn't teach, yet it's the foundation of every genuine transformation. Beneath the surface of everything you perceive as solid reality, there exists a field that governs all manifestation. Physics calls it the quantum field, an infinite ocean of potential energy where every possible reality exists simultaneously, awaiting selection. What most consciousness explorers miss is this critical detail. The field doesn't respond to announcements, performances, or declarations. It responds exclusively to coherence. It listens not to your words, but to your frequency. When your thoughts, emotions, and physical state align in a single direction, this alignment doesn't arrive loudly. It emerges quiet, subtle, almost imperceptible, like a lake's surface becoming so still it perfectly mirrors the sky above. The scientific framework for this invisible transformation lives in what's called coherence and wave function collapse. A thought, when sustained with emotion and embodied physically, becomes a coherent signal. That signal resonates within the quantum field, collapsing waves of potential into particles of manifest reality. But this collapse doesn't announce itself like thunder. It's more like a light switch activating in a dark room. Instant, subtle, complete. Yet because our minds are conditioned to expect drama, we dismiss these quiet shifts as insignificant. We search for obvious signs, dramatic evidence, external confirmation. But the field doesn't require confirmation. The moment coherence achieves stability, the change has already anchored into reality. Neuroscience reveals another critical layer. When neurons activate together in novel patterns, they begin forming connections. Initially, these new neural pathways are fragile, microscopic threads barely visible under the most powerful instruments. But through consistent repetition paired with emotional intensity, your brain strengthens these circuits until they become the dominant highways of your perception and behavior. The silent moments when no observers are present, these are precisely when your brain is physically constructing your future. The laboratory of transformation isn't on a stage with an audience. It exists in the invisible exchanges happening between synapses every microsecond. If you truly understood the power concentrated in these hidden moments, you would treat them as sacred ceremonies. Here's the incomplete puzzle that frustrates seekers. If the field responds to quiet coherence, why do so many manifestation attempts collapse into failure? The answer isn't found in greater effort or endless affirmation repetition. The hidden reason is contradictory signaling. Someone meditates for 10 minutes each morning, then spends the remaining 23 hours and 50 minutes rehearsing worry, fear, and doubt. To the quantum field, coherence never stabilizes. It's like attempting to tune a radio while constantly moving the dial. You never hold one frequency long enough for clear reception. This explains why certain people insist the principles don't work for them. It's not that quantum manifestation is broken. It's that they haven't learned to sustain the silent state. Notice this pattern interrupt. The quieter you become internally, the more dramatically your external life shifts. This inverts the narrative we've all carried. We believe we must struggle, force, and broadcast our desires into existence. But quantum physics reveals the opposite. The particles assembling your reality are already listening, not to your voice, but to your vibrational state. Every microsecond, your heart and brain either align or conflict. When aligned, you emit an electromagnetic broadcast powerful enough to bend probability curves. Yet this broadcast produces no sound. No one applauds. The change initiates invisibly. There's a documented case of a woman who transformed her entire trajectory through one simple practice. Every night for 30 days, she altered her state before sleep, practicing falling asleep while inhabiting the feeling of her desired reality already manifest. She told no one, made no announcements, posted nothing online. Yet at day 30, circumstances began rearranging themselves in ways she couldn't have engineered through conventional action. Career opportunities materialized, relationships healed, health improved. Observers labeled it coincidence. But the truth? This was the silent language of coherence communicating with the quantum field. The invisible ripple was already moving long before anyone saw the surface disturbance. If this is resonating with you, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you stay connected to this frequency of transformation. Your brain craves resolution. So when results don't appear immediately, it convinces you nothing is happening. But that's the illusion. The field is always reorganizing silently before evidence manifests visibly. Imagine planting seeds, then digging them up daily to check for sprouting. This is exactly how most people sabotage their own becoming. They cannot trust silence long enough for roots to establish. Here's the loop you need to internalize. What unfolds in the unseen realm holds infinitely more importance than what appears in the seen. Just wait until you recognize how much has already shifted beneath your conscious awareness. Science and spirituality converge at this precise point. Physics demonstrates that energy fields influence one another without physical contact through resonance. Ancient spiritual traditions teach that prayer performed in secret, meditation practiced in solitude, inner work completed away from all external eyes. This is where true power generates. Both perspectives point to identical truth. The invisible governs the visible, which means the quantum field isn't persuaded by performance. It's moved by presence. And presence cultivates itself exclusively in silence. So ask yourself directly, if the field moves quietly, if neurons rewire without announcement, if reality collapses into form without applause, why do you keep demanding visible proof? The answer will challenge your conditioning. It's because you haven't yet learned to trust that silence is sufficient. But silence isn't emptiness. It's absolute fullness. It's the space where waves crystallize into particles, where potential becomes actual, where your life reorganizes while no one notices. The field has always been moving in whispers. The question is whether you'll learn to move in harmony with its nature. If you want to understand why some individuals completely transform their lives while others remain trapped in repetitive cycles, you must look beneath surface desires into identity itself. Identity is the true engine driving all transformation. It's not what you want that shapes your experience, but who you are being in each moment. The quantum field doesn't respond to desperate wishing. It responds to coherence between your state of being and the reality you claim as already yours. And here's the paradox. When you shift identity silently, without announcement, you're rewriting your entire script in ways no one can perceive until the evidence becomes absolutely undeniable. Science explains this with precision. Neuroplasticity demonstrates that your brain constantly sculpts itself to match whatever patterns you reinforce. When you identify as someone who struggles, your neurons fire in configurations that perpetuate struggle. When you choose the identity of someone who creates, new circuits begin forming, even before any visible evidence appears in your external world. The change initiates invisibly in your brain's physical architecture. But here's the twist most people miss. These new circuits are fragile initially, like thin trails in an untouched forest. If you expose them to the noise of seeking validation, announcing your shift before it has stabilized, you risk destroying the very pathways you're attempting to establish. Neville Goddard stated it directly. You don't manifest what you want. You manifest what you are. That's why he taught assuming the state of the wish fulfilled as a practice. You don't inform the world you're changing. You become the change internally, in complete privacy, until reality has no alternative but to reflect it externally. Joe Dispenza reinforces this with neuroscience. When you embody a new emotional signature, your physical body literally begins existing in the future relative to the quantum field. The shift is already complete long before anyone else can detect it. That's why the most powerful transformations aren't visible in their early stages. They're encoded in your identity beneath the surface, invisible yet absolutely unshakable. Let me interrupt the pattern here. The more you attempt to prove your transformation to others, the less real it actually is. Consider that carefully. If you already were that new version of yourself, would you need to convince anyone? Obviously not. The compulsion to prove is itself proof of incompleteness. The silent shift of identity requires zero performance. It's a becoming, a quiet alignment that stabilizes until external reality eventually conforms to match it. That's why initially it feels like nothing is changing. You're transforming silently while the external world takes time to catch up with your new frequency. But when it does catch up, the shift appears sudden to everyone else, though you know it's been unfolding invisibly for months or even years. Consider this example. A person who privately decides, "I am abundant now," and lives from that inner identity, even when their bank account doesn't yet reflect it, is broadcasting a coherent signal into the quantum field. Their choices begin subtly aligning with abundance. Their nervous system stops rehearsing scarcity, so opportunities resonate with them differently. Friends might notice nothing at first. Family might think everything's the same. But one day, circumstances pivot dramatically, and people ask, "How did this happen so quickly?" The truth? It didn't happen quickly. It happened quietly beneath the surface in the invisible realm of identity. There's a psychological puzzle your brain attempts to solve here. If identity shifts invisibly, how do you know when it has genuinely changed? The answer is subtle. You feel it somatically in your body. Old triggers stop activating you. Old fears lose their magnetic pull. Old patterns seem distant, almost irrelevant. That quiet detachment isn't indifference, it's coherence. Your nervous system is no longer addicted to the familiar frequencies. And when your biology shifts, reality has zero choice but to reflect that shift. But most people miss this signal because they're waiting for external proof first. They don't realize the inner shift is the actual proof. Everything external follows automatically. Take a moment and share in the comments. What's one old pattern or trigger that's beginning to lose its grip on you as you step into this understanding? Identity also explains why transformation feels impossible when you try forcing it through action alone. If your actions conflict with your core identity, the old circuits always dominate. It's like swimming upstream with a weight chained to your body. You expend tremendous energy, but the current of who you believe you are pulls you back to the starting point. But when identity shifts, action becomes effortless. You no longer need to convince yourself to behave differently. It happens organically. The person who identifies as a non-smoker doesn't battle cigarette cravings. The person who identifies as an athlete doesn't negotiate about training. The person who identifies as a creator doesn't force productivity. When identity shifts, behavior flows naturally, like water following gravity. Here's the curiosity loop to internalize. The real transformation isn't found in what you do. It's found in what you stop needing to prove. Just wait until you experience how dramatically your life changes when you stop arguing with the old identity and simply stop being it. This is why silence equals power. You don't waste energy convincing. You invest energy becoming. And when you do, the shift happening beneath the surface becomes the most unshakable foundation imaginable. The quantum field is always listening. And it doesn't hear your declarations. It hears your state of being. Beneath the surface, identity functions as reality's hidden language. When you shift who you are, even silently, the quantum field responds without question. And when that response begins unfolding, it appears sudden to observers. But you'll know the truth. The shift was always happening quietly beneath the surface in the invisible architecture of who you decided to become. Every genuine transformation begins with ritual, though not the kind you're imagining. Most people picture elaborate ceremonies or visible practices, but the most potent rituals are silent ones, performed in the private sanctuary of your consciousness and body, far from any observer's awareness. The alignment that reorders your reality doesn't require candles, altars, or announcements. It requires coherence, a simple, quiet practice of bringing heart, mind, and body into resonance. Practiced consistently, this becomes the silent ritual that bends the quantum field around you. Science explains the mechanism. The HeartMath Institute has demonstrated that when your heart's rhythm becomes coherent, smooth, and ordered, it synchronizes with your brain waves, creating physiological harmony. In this state, your body's electromagnetic field expands, radiating measurable energy into surrounding space. This isn't metaphor, it's physics. Every human heart generates a field, and coherence amplifies its strength. That field communicates directly with the quantum field, carrying the signal of your identity and intentions. But here's the paradox. Coherence isn't achieved through noise or striving. It emerges through quiet repetition, through silent rituals you perform when absolutely no one is watching. Breathing is among the simplest, yet most powerful of these rituals. Inhale slowly and deeply. Exhale even longer than the inhale, and allow your body to discover its rhythm. Within minutes, your nervous system shifts from survival mode into creative mode. Stress hormones decline, oxytocin and serotonin increase, and your body relaxes into trust. In that trust state, your signal to the field becomes coherent. The ritual is invisible, but its effects ripple through every dimension of your life. If you practice this before sleep each night, your subconscious carries the signal through the darkness, weaving your new identity into your biology's very fabric. Yet most people dismiss such practices as too simple. They want dramatic techniques, forgetting that the quantum field responds to simplicity, not complexity. But let's go deeper into why breath is so powerful. Ancient traditions called it prana, chi, or life force, but modern science is beginning to understand the mechanism. When you consciously control your breath, you're directly influencing your autonomic nervous system, the part of you that usually operates below conscious awareness. You're essentially hacking into the operating system of your body. And here's what most people miss. Your breath pattern is directly linked to your emotional state, which is directly linked to the electromagnetic signal your heart generates, which is directly linked to how the quantum field reads your frequency. It's all connected. One continuous circuit of energy and information. When you breathe consciously, slowly, with intention, you're not just relaxing. You're literally rewriting the electromagnetic signature you're broadcasting into the field. Studies using magnetometers have measured the heart's electromagnetic field, extending up to 15 feet beyond the physical body. That field changes its pattern based on your emotional state, and your emotional state is intimately connected to your breath. So this simple practice of conscious breathing isn't just calming you down. It's changing the very shape of the field you're projecting into space, which changes how the quantum field responds to you, which changes what manifests in your reality. All from something as simple as breath. This is why yogis spent lifetimes mastering pranayama. They understood something modern science is only beginning to measure. Here's the incomplete puzzle. People obsess over addition. More affirmations, more vision boards, more techniques, more effort. But the true key often lives in subtraction. What if the most powerful ritual isn't what you add, but what you stop doing? What if you stopped rehearsing fear before sleep? Stopped carrying old narratives into new mornings? Stopped feeding your nervous system reasons to remain in distrust? The silent ritual of alignment isn't about accumulating more practices. It's about removing the static interference so your signal can transmit with clarity. Just wait until you experience what unfolds when your internal silence becomes clean. Now, what we're exploring today is truly just the surface of something far more profound. The concept of silent transformation is actually one of 9 master frequencies I've mapped out in complete detail in my book, Beyond the Frequencies, a quantum guide to consciousness mastery. If you're feeling this pull toward understanding how to become the broadcast itself, rather than constantly trying to manifest from a place of seeking, the book takes you through the entire system, layer by layer, with practices that move you from unconscious transmission into embodied mastery. It's linked in the pinned comment below. Stories of transformation always trace back to unseen practices. A man who silently repeated gratitude every morning without mentioning it to anyone. A woman who fell asleep nightly rehearsing the feeling of already being whole. They told no one, created no spectacle, no social media documentation. Yet months later, their lives appeared completely different. People said, "You've changed," without ever knowing the invisible rituals that made it possible. This is the proof. What you practice in silence holds infinitely more power than what you announce publicly. Now pause right here. I want you to anchor this truth into action. Take a moment and comment below with this phrase: I transform silently while reality shifts. Write it as a declaration. Not for me, not for other viewers, but as your first conscious signal to the quantum field. The act of typing those words plants a seed of coherence. It tells your subconscious, this is the frequency I'm choosing. The ritual appears invisible to others, but it encodes directly into your system. And when you revisit those words later, you'll see them not as a simple comment, but as evidence that the invisible shift already began in this moment. Let's interrupt the pattern once more. Rituals aren't about external display, they're about internal states. Your body is the temple, your breath is the ceremony, your state of being is the offering. Every time you return to coherence, even for brief minutes, you're performing a ritual that instructs the quantum field. And because the field responds to quiet signals, you don't need to broadcast it loudly. One aligned breath carries more power than 100 frantic affirmations. One silent practice maintained with consistency outweighs years of noisy effort. Spiritual traditions have always encoded this knowledge. Mystics spoke of the secret place, the inner chamber where prayer and imagination held more creative power than public worship. Yogis taught pranayama not as mere exercise, but as alignment of breath and consciousness with universal flow. Even Christ taught, when you pray, enter your room and close the door. All traditions point toward identical reality. The ritual isn't meant for others to witness. The ritual is meant for the field to receive. And here's the loop carrying us forward. When you make alignment your daily ritual, you stop chasing change. It begins chasing you. The magnetic pull of coherence draws circumstances, people, and opportunities into orbit around your new frequency. The quantum field cannot ignore a stable signal. But this magnetism doesn't advertise itself. It remains silent, invisible, unnoticed by those not attuned to subtle energies. Which is why when your life suddenly reorganizes, people ask, how did this happen?